Welcome. My name is Michael Gold. I'm the interim director of the University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry. And on behalf of the center and also our School of Natural Resources, our College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources, and the University of Missouri, I wanted to welcome you to the 10th Annual Agroforestry Symposium. We have a different theme every year. This is our 10th Annual Research Symposium, and this year, as you're aware, we're focusing on innovation to entrepreneurship. Our Center for Agroforestry is recognized as one of the premier centers in the world, and we play in all spaces of the university, in research, in education, in outreach, and also in economic development, which we're going to focus on today. And before we begin, and I invite the dean to come up, I just wanted to make sure that I thank all of the organizations who are, keep flipping up on the screen here, who are sponsoring this event. And I also want to thank all of the speakers who are from campus, from the US, and even from abroad who've come to present today. And finally, I want to thank my colleagues, Gregory Ormsby-Maury and Caroline Todd, who've done the giant amount of legwork to put this together and do a really great job. So it's my privilege right now to welcome and introduce the Dean and Vice Chancellor of the College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources, Chris Daubert. And if you want to learn about agroforestry, just pick up one of our new annual reports, and I don't have to make any more remarks about that. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Greg and Caroline, for inviting me to speak to you all this morning. I want to thank the entire center for organizing this event, and especially for my invitation to be here with you today. On behalf of the College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources, I'm delighted to welcome you to the 10th Annual Center for Agroforestry Symposium. The theme for this year focuses on innovation, entrepreneurship, and translation of research, a very exciting and timely topic as CAFNR is currently identifying fresh approaches to help our faculty navigate the many pathways to commercialization. I'm excited for you to hear and to learn from the great lineup of speakers that are on the agenda for today. Last night, we had the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Rodolphe Berengu. He was our featured speaker, opening the symposium last evening. And today, you'll hear from Dr. Kelly Sexton. She is our keynote for today. Both of those leaders are well known as innovators in their field. They're knowledgeable about the pursuit of entrepreneurship and the translation of research. I am thrilled that they have agreed to travel to Columbia and to share their experiences and their expertise with all of us today. I have known both Drs. Berengu and Sexton for many years, going back to 1998 when I was a young assistant professor. I first was introduced to Rodolphe Berengu. They were both great colleagues for me during my years at NC State. CAFNR and MU play a very important role in bridging the gap between research and application, from innovation to commercial development and economic impact. I am confident that we can play an even larger role here in CAFNR going forward, working with partner agencies and organizations in the state, while also connecting to regional and national groups. I think many of you may know that my background is food science and engineering. Here in Missouri, there is tremendous potential for growth in the food manufacturing industries. CAFNR will continue to advance innovation and economic growth in the ag and natural resource industries. Since my arrival to CAFNR, I've learned a lot about agroforestry, how the woody perennials in agricultural landscapes can enhance ecosystem diversity, improve soils and water quality, and augment economic returns for farmers and ranchers through diversified specialty crop income opportunities and value-added enterprises. CAFNR's very own Center for Agroforestry has been a national and an international leader in the research and promotion of agroforestry practices. Agroforestry emphasizes development of value-added entrepreneurship and specialty crop industries. Some examples of Center for Agroforestry accomplishments in this field include efforts to advance regional elderberry and chestnut industries, and creating successful interdisciplinary partnerships to develop and license technological innovations for biofuels, seed coatings, bioremediation, pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, and other natural products. An initiative CAFNR is proud to help launch will also benefit Missouri's farmers and ranchers, its land managers, entrepreneurs by stimulating innovation and entrepreneurship in the ag and forestry sectors and the development of new processing capacity and new value-added businesses. The Show Me State Food, Beverage, and Forest Products Manufacturing Initiative is an opportunity to achieve greater economic impact for Missouri agriculture by transforming our commodities in-state into specialty products that all consumers desire. We have partnered with groups around the state on this initiative and recently contracted to have an economic feasibility study performed to determine the opportunities for this type of economic development for our state of Missouri. The study found tremendous potential for Missouri, the potential to expand total ag and food manufacturing economic activity to more than $71 billion. That's an increase of more than $25 billion compared to current economic impacts today. And it could potentially contribute more than 70,000 new jobs for the state of Missouri. The next phase of this initiative will create a statewide task force and convene working groups around each of the 3 recommendations proposed in the study. And the task force will deliver specific recommendations sometime in the next 12 months. So now it's my pleasure to introduce all of you to Dr. Kelly Sexton. She's the first of our invited speakers today, and Dr. Sexton is well-versed in innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology transfer. She is recognized as one of the leading experts in this area in higher education. Dr. Sexton is the Associate Vice President for Research, Technology Transfer, and Innovation Partnerships for the University of Michigan. And as a Michigan State alum, it's difficult for me to say that. At the University of Michigan, she works closely with the Vice President for Research as well as other leaders across the university to provide visionary and strategic leadership of U of M's innovation and technology transfer activities, including the Office of Technology Transfer. In this role, Kelly supports and encourages university-wide programs for intellectual property development, innovation, and engagement with business, venture, and government communities in the region, across the nation, and around the globe. Kelly earned a PhD in molecular pathology from UC San Diego and a Bachelor of Science in molecular biology and biochemistry from the University of Georgia. Dr. Sexton realized that research commercialization was her passion while performing breast cancer research as a postdoctoral fellow at Stanford University. After completing that fellowship, she interned with the Stanford Office of Technology Licensing before joining North Carolina State University. Prior to joining the University of Michigan in January of 2018, so congratulations on your 1-year anniversary.
Thank you.
Kelly was the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Technology Commercialization and New Ventures at North Carolina State University. Under Kelly's leadership, the office doubled the number of licenses and options executed per year. The office tripled the number of startup companies launched, in addition to helping to create an alumni angel investor network. The Wolfpack Investor Network, WIN, WIN. I think that's a great acronym. And that network provides new sources of funding for university startups and spin-outs. It was at NC State, obviously, where I first came to know Kelly. We worked together for many years. In fact, I think when I departed my former institution to take this opportunity here with all of you, I left as the longest-serving member of the university's Intellectual Property Committee. And while serving on that committee, Kelly and I shared responsibility in rewriting NC State's Patent Policy Committee, and I believe that patent policy still stands in that form to this day. I think that's right.
It does, and it's a model.
And it's a model. So, Kelly is a true leader in the field of technology transfer and innovation, and I'm so pleased that she accepted our invitation to be here and for all of you to hear from her today. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Dr. Kelly Sexton.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for braving the snowy roads to make it out. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited about today's series of speakers and panels and the topic. I want to thank Dean Daubert and Greg and the rest of the organizers for this symposium, for putting this on, and for the opportunity to be here and speak with you today. So greetings from the other U of M. As Chris mentioned, I do have experience at land-grant universities. I did my undergrad at University of Georgia, as did my parents before me, the first of our family to attend a university, received their education at land-grant. So I really hold the mission of land-grant universities near and dear to my heart. So I hope with our kind of smaller size today, because of the weather, we can have a lot of opportunity for dialogue and discussion today. So I want to start by spending a little bit of time just talking about the modern research university. I think sometimes for those of us within the universities, we forget that society needs constant reminding of the value that we provide and really our unique role in society. For the public, when they think about universities, they think about us as places that teach students, which is important. It's an important role that we play. But we need to provide constant education about the unique role of research universities and research institutions, and that we provide value to society beyond knowledge transfer to young people. The Institute of Research on Innovation and Science, IRIS, is a consortium of universities from around the country. It seeks to help better understand and explain the value of research universities. I'm happy to say that Mizzou is indeed a member, and they put out a number of wonderful resources that I encourage everyone here to use in their talking points, especially when speaking to the public. And one of the unique things that IRIS has pointed out to me is our value in research universities in terms of our ability to have a capacity to understand and respond to an unknown and uncertain future. And I see that when I look at some of the early drafts of the Kaffner Strategic Plan. We know that climate change, global food insecurity, these are big concerns for our society. We can see them coming. We don't know exactly what form they're going to take, but we know that we need to have strong research universities and research infrastructure in order to be able to adapt and respond to these challenges as they arise. It's really us as research universities. There's no other thing in our society that has this capacity to quickly pivot, use science to help understand new challenges, and to respond to it. And you see this in things like the response to Zika virus. Zika was known for over 70 years, but it was thought, and it was known to have relatively mild symptoms, and it was self-limiting, didn't transmit from person to person, or so we thought. So it was largely ignored. And then came 2015 and the Zika outbreak in Brazil that started spreading around the world. We came to quickly understand that it can transmit from human to human and that it causes horrible birth defects when pregnant women are exposed to infected with Zika virus. So going from no funding for Zika and very few labs in the world with any expertise in it, almost no understanding of the biology of the Zika virus, science sprinted towards the challenge. And within weeks, in the first couple of months, within about 8 weeks of the first alarm bells ringing about Zika, you had scientific publications on the topic as scientists raced to understand how Zika replicated, how it was infecting others, and to understand really what it was doing to people during infection. This publication from, I believe, 2018 in PNAS describes a 7-month sprint from hearing about Zika to getting to a phase 1 clinical trial for a Zika virus. You can't do this and have this type of response to new challenges without public investment in our research universities. And it's incumbent on us to be able to tell this story and to make sure people realize all of the value that we're providing to society. And of course, another role that we play is in transmitting and disseminating knowledge. And I think there's no better example of universities that take this role and this responsibility very strongly than to think about our public land-grant universities. With their missions of research, teaching, and extension, this responsibility for taking the knowledge that's generated at our land-grant research universities and transmitting it to the public, transmitting it to the citizens of our state, to the industries in our state. This is natural for land-grant universities. You know, we all understand it's part of our mandate and part of what we need to do. And you know, what I always find so inspiring to think back on land-grant universities, think about when they were created. So the Morrill Act, 1862, our country was at civil war when this legislation was signed. President Lincoln didn't even know if we were really going to be the United States of America at the end of the war. It was far from certain. Things were not going very well during the war at the time in 1862. But our leaders knew if we wanted to emerge from this horrible civil war as a great nation, we needed to invest in our public research universities. And that was why they passed the Morrill Act, signed it into law, and in doing so laid the basis for creating our great land-grant universities. It's taken us all this time to build this infrastructure, build this network of research universities engaged in research, teaching, and extension. But it's something that can be torn apart pretty quickly by lack of public investment. So it's incumbent on us to continue to explain to citizens the unique role that we play through research, through extension, and that yes, educating students is important, but these other aspects of research universities that aren't often well understood are very important to our society. You see this in action all the time at land-grant universities. I saw this at my former institution, North Carolina State University. Something as humble as the sweet potato, but it made a huge impact in our state. In the late 90s in North Carolina, sweet potato yields were declining. The main variety that was being used, the Beauregard, just was not performing, it wasn't responding well to stressful weather conditions, the soils of North Carolina. And you had sweet potato breeders at NC State, because they had that capacity for research and innovation, taking on the challenge, developing new varieties, working with the farmers to do field trials, test them, and by 1999, they were in field trials for the Covington sweet potato. By 2001, they were able to begin providing this stock to farmers around the state, around the country, and now it's around the globe. So if you fast forward to today, 90% of the sweet potatoes grown in North Carolina are the Covington sweet potato, something that didn't even exist before 2000. And you have twice as much land under cultivation. Thanks to the Covington sweet potato, profits for the growers have increased by 25% as compared to before its introduction. It's now grown around the world and around the country. And, you know, because it was part of a land-grant university's discovery, you also have extension agents working with farmers to help them see how they can convert their old tobacco warehouses into sweet potato curing facilities. So this wonderful role that a land-grant university can play in developing new innovations, transferring them to the citizens and to the public and to the industries to help them diversify their revenue and income streams, but also in helping them understand how to use it and how to make value-added products from the sweet potato through our Department of Food Science at the university. So many, many benefits from, you know, for one industry that you can point to. Looking over the CAFNR website, there were a lot of stories I could have picked from. I chose this one on the beef industry because I've been wanting to have a photo of a cow in a presentation for a long time, and there just wasn't good reason for it at the University of Michigan. I kept trying to put one in, and it just wasn't working. So now I get to have my presentation with soulful cows gazing into the sunset by a pond. But, you know, even here, so, you know, for the cattle farmers and the dairy farmers, understanding how to manage rotational grazing of their fields, this took 20 years of research to understand management-intensive grazing, to articulate its benefits, fully understand it. And, you know, that was the research piece, and then came the extension. So helping transmit this knowledge of how to engage in management-intensive grazing and helping the farmers, the dairy farmers, the cattlemen, understand how to use this in the field. And this is the beautiful benefit of research combined with the mission of extension. And, you know, a tremendous economic benefit of $125 million a year. A company is not going to do this. The private sector is not going to make this type of long-term investment in the research infrastructure necessary to understand how to help local industries adapt to uncertain futures, uncertain climate, understand how to diversify their income streams. This is a unique role that we can play, and it's important that we're able to talk about it. So as if all of that isn't enough, our modern research universities also make miracles. In a wonderful op-ed piece, Eric Schmidt, CEO of Alphabet, parent company of Google, and the president of the Broad Institute, which is a collaboration between MIT and Harvard, describes the modern research university as a miracle machine. In this op-ed piece in the Washington Post, they talk about how the miracle machine is somewhat in danger because of reduced federal funding, and how it's important for all of us to remind society that the things we enjoy in modern life, our modern medicine, our cell phones, they're not possible without long-term sustained investment in research. So on this image, this is the world's smallest computer. This was created at University of Michigan, and we're working with our faculty to help bring it to market. But, you know, so I think this is a nickel. So we're making miracles. We're making huge technological advances. And it's important for us to remind society that these things don't happen without sustained long-term commitment to our research infrastructure. And, you know, we can't think too short-term. So, you know, we need to tell stories about how research on Drosophila, understanding embryogenesis in Drosophila, starting in the 1970s, sustained funding to help understand how fruit flies develop, led to the discovery of the hedgehog signaling pathway, which had tremendous implications for understanding human signaling pathways, human disease, has given rise to one FDA-approved treatment for basal cell carcinoma, with 2 other cancer treatments currently in the clinic. And of course, if you look at all FDA-approved drugs, now a study was done to look at 6 years' worth of FDA drug approvals, you can tie NIH funding on basic science research to every one of these FDA-approved drugs. You don't get to have modern medicine without the research universities and without our long-term commitment to helping understand basic science. You know, and it's for me, it's always interesting to think about things that we take for granted today. So if you think about the internet, it started in the 60s with federal funding to try to link together computers at a handful of university campuses. And from there, with sustained funding from DARPA, from the National Science Foundation, we grew the ARPANET. And you know, from there, it was a sprint to create the internet that we know and enjoy today, that has doubtless brought tremendous economic growth to our country, has allowed us to maintain our technological dominance. Because we're not just competing with ourselves as states, we're competing with the rest of the world. It's important that the internet was created in the United States, that the knowledge of the infrastructure of the internet resided within university campuses around the country. This has allowed us to create a tremendous technological advances in our society. You know, another wonderful university invention that's really changed our lives came to us from funding from the National Science Foundation. This is lifted from the patent for the PageRank algorithm that was awarded to Stanford University. And the inventor was Larry Page, a graduate student at Stanford at the time, University of Michigan undergrad before he moved to the coast. And you know, this National Science Foundation funding was awarded to Stanford so that they could explore the creation of digital libraries. Not something that you can see an immediate commercial application for, but nonetheless, it gave rise to this algorithm that laid the groundwork for Google. And you know, it's always interesting to look back at this as well. You can see that one of the publications cited in the patent goes back to 1953. And from, as best I could tell, this was a sociology professor. So, and if you look, Dr. Katz actually received funding from the National Science Foundation. So it's because you have this sustained investment in knowledge, understanding, learning, going from the 1950s all the way until the creation of Google and the award of the patent in 2001. These things don't happen overnight. They are indeed miracles, but they're only made possible because of the strength of our research university infrastructure and the partnership we have with society to help provide funding so that we can create this robust infrastructure, so that we can continue producing miracles like Google that's created enormous, vast wealth in our country. I believe Alphabet, the parent company of Google, spent around $8 billion on internal research projects last year. Incredible wealth and incredible return on investment for this investment in research infrastructure. And of course, being from the Tech Transfer Office, I want to talk a bit about one unique form of knowledge transfer that universities engage in, and that's really through technology transfer, patenting, and licensing. But I want to be clear, that's just kind of one of the value propositions we provide to society. We have great stories and great impact around technology transfer, but we always need to be careful to tell the whole story of the work that we do. And we don't want our society focused on short-term returns. For every technological advance universities create, there are decades of investment in basic research and the research infrastructure behind them. Technology transfer really traces its roots back to 1980. And at the time, senators, the government, realized that we were in danger of losing our technological edge. They wanted to unlock the innovations at universities, create an incentive for universities to invest in patenting technologies, building tech transfer operations, and moving these technologies out into practice in the broader world. And so to do that, they knew there needed to be some sort of economic incentive. So they allowed universities to own inventions that were created, even if they involved federal funding. That was really the big change. Prior to that, the federal funding agency typically owned any resulting inventions. And because they're located in DC and universities are located around the country, that was a little bit hard to manage and not very effective. And I think, Bayh-Dole has been very successful. This is taken from The Economist, where they said more than anything, the single policy measure helped to reverse America's precipitous slide into industrial irrelevance. That's heady stuff. That's strong stuff. We've got to constantly remind the public that it's really research universities that are driving our economic competitiveness. It's not always easy to draw that straight line from funding on something as esoteric as exploring the creation of digital libraries to one of the nation's largest wealth-generating corporations, but we need to be vigilant and be able to tell that story. So university tech transfer, that process of protecting university research discoveries, partnering with the private sector to transfer them out, has been very impactful. In a study from 1996 to 2015, this one form of knowledge transfer contributed $1.3 trillion to the US gross industrial output. These are real numbers. These are tied to university patents transferred by license to private companies. That one very well-defined form of knowledge transfer. Over $590 billion contributed to the US gross domestic product and 4.3 million jobs supported. In 2017 alone, universities formed over 1,000 startup companies focused on commercializing research discoveries created on their campus. This number does not include the startups that our alumni form. This does not include the startups that are formed around the university, only made possible because of that osmotic leak of knowledge from our universities. These are companies that have a license to intellectual property created at the university, hard metrics that we can really quantify and count. 755 new products brought to market through the licenses that all of the universities are tracking in our databases in our tech transfer office. Real numbers, real impact. And what you've seen around university tech transfer is that startups have become increasingly important as a mechanism to transmit research discoveries created on our campus to the private sector. There's a few reasons here. One is that companies are pulling back from their willingness to bring in early stage technologies. That's one reason. So as universities, we need to find ways to help develop our technologies further. And startup companies are a great mechanism for doing that. Universities are not great at commercializing our own technologies. We need to spin them out into companies led by entrepreneurs who can raise money to build the business and further advance the technology. That's really the role of startup companies. Sometimes the startup companies become, large companies one day. That's one possible path to success. More often than not, they're building the business to be acquired by a larger company. So in some regards, startup companies are really just filling a gap between the university and between big business. And it's incredibly important. And so that's really where I wanted to focus the rest of our time together this morning, was to talk about how do we boost the entrepreneurial ecosystem surrounding our country's great research universities. How do we become more effective at taking our discoveries, partnering with entrepreneurs, partnering with investors to move these technologies into startup companies so they can be brought to broader use? And there's a lot of challenges around this. So entrepreneurial ecosystems can be thought of as being like an internal combustion engine. They need 3 essential elements. They need a spark, they need oxygen, and they need fuel in order to be successful. And so the spark is innovation. At universities, we have no shortage of great innovations. For us, that's never the rate limiting factor at an R1 university. The oxygen is the talent, the people. It's the entrepreneur you need to build the business around the technology. It's the product development team the entrepreneur needs to surround themselves with, advisors, mentors, people to run the company. This is a bigger challenge for some of our universities. For those of us that are not located in urban centers, we don't have the density of talent. So if you think back to the map of the land-grant universities, they typically weren't started in urban centers. They were focused on mechanical agricultural arts. They were often located away from urban centers. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for us in Ann Arbor, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we need to figure out a way to address this, because we do need to unlock and unleash all of the innovations at all of our great R1 universities in this country. And I'll talk about a few programs that I've seen be impactful in that regard. The third ingredient is the fuel, and that's the capital needed to help drive the entrepreneurial ecosystem. This is also a challenge for many of us. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So when we talk about capital, you'll hear kind of 2 ways used to describe it. One is venture capital, and venture capital is very important for startup companies, but there's challenges associated with it. The other form that investment capital takes is sometimes referred to as angel investment. Angels are just wealthy individuals. That's all they are. They're accredited investors. There's certain criteria around the amount of wealth they need to have in order to be deemed able and financially able to invest in something as risky as a startup endeavor. But that's really all an angel investor is. And the issue with capital is that it is not located where most of our R1 universities are. Due to history, geography, it is located on the coast. And really, it's located in California, in Boston, and New York. 75% of venture capital is invested in startups in California, in Boston, and in New York. And so for the rest of us, this is a huge challenge. Another important point to note is that venture capital only goes to 4% of zip codes in our country. So it's very unevenly distributed. And so that presents a challenge for us. And you'll hear people say, money flows across borders, good ideas can always get funding. That's true at the later stages for startup companies, once they're more established and successful. But in the early stages, it's just not as true. You're not going to get someone from California to jump on a flight, even a direct flight to somewhere, certainly not somewhere with 2 stops. I've met with venture capitalists in the Bay Area before that have said, LA's a schlep. Why would I come to Ann Arbor? The joke in the Bay Area, and I've been spending a lot of time there, is that investments need to be within Tesla driving distance. So that's kind of the proximity. Early stage startup investing is very network driven. It's very much around personal relationships. So that's a big challenge for us because of where the innovation is. Innovation is all around our country. So this is a list of where patents are concentrated, and it's largely around cities and it's near universities. Yeah, there's more in the Northeast and there's a lot in California, but it's much more evenly distributed around the country. And so how do we build ecosystems around these pockets of innovation that are largely tied to our R1 universities? How do we help each of them become as healthy of an innovation ecosystem as California, Boston, New York? Because this is important for our country. It's important for our economic competitiveness. We're building great things in the Midwest, in the Southeast, all over the country, but we need the ecosystems to help pull them out of the university and build them into profitable businesses. So that's really the challenge. How do we go about this? And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about a few programs around the country that have been successful at this, and to think about how we can do more. While we're on this, this is May Mobility. This is a U of M startup company focused on autonomous vehicles. They're actually, they were spun out under about a year and a half ago, and they now have contracts with municipalities around the country, including in Detroit. This is downtown Detroit. And so if you think about revitalization, Ann Arbor is about 45 minutes from Detroit. Marrying the innovation at the University of Michigan with Detroit is something we're really excited about being able to do. So one of the great programs that's really around changing the culture of the academy is the National Science Foundation's I-Corps program. So I-Corps is really focused on helping engineers and scientists understand how to even think about engaging in technology commercialization and entrepreneurship. It's about giving them a new vocabulary for understanding this undertaking. It's about helping them understand how to talk to potential customers, potential buyers, potential end users of their technologies. One of the great things about I-Corps is it involves a faculty lead and typically a junior lead. So you're also passing this knowledge on to graduate students and to postdocs, who oftentimes will be the ones to carry the banner of the technology out of the university. The teams also involve a mentor. So this is where it's very important to get your local industry engaged with the university in this activity to build these 3-person teams to be competitive for the I-Corps program. There's I-Corps nodes around the country. So when teams from Mizzou apply for I-Corps funding, they're going to be sent to one of the nodes. But there's also I-Corps sites. And I know there is a site in Missouri, although not in Columbia, but those are great resources to provide a lighter version of the I-Corps curriculum as a starting point for getting involved. I-Corps is based on lean startup methodology. It was created by Steve Blank at Stanford as he worked to help engineers understand how they could engage in technology commercialization. I think it's, a fabulous program. I encourage you to encourage your faculty to apply for this, and perhaps even to think about creating a site at Mizzou. We created a site at NC State before I left a few years ago, and it's been very impactful. You train around 15 cohorts 3 times a year. The venture mentoring service is also around growing talent, supporting first-time entrepreneurs, growing your own entrepreneurs. This program was created at MIT. It's been licensed and used around the world, and I see it's also here. So I applaud you for creating your own venture mentoring service here in Mizzou. And I encourage you all to interface with this program and to encourage business to interface with it. I first came into contact with the Venture Mentor Service program in RTP, where it was offered by the Council for Entrepreneurial Development, a nonprofit focused on supporting and growing entrepreneurs in North Carolina. Their sweet spot was really in mentoring first-time entrepreneurs for startup companies that had a full-time CEO. That was really where they found they added value. They had 60 volunteer mentors, people with deep industry expertise, some serial entrepreneurs who volunteered their time to help mentor these first-time entrepreneurs. These are the kinds of programs we have to create to grow our own ecosystems, to grow our own talent. It's a great program, and I encourage you to learn more about that. Another resource that we can tap into as universities is, of course, our alumni networks. And if we can figure out how to engage them to help us advance our ecosystems, we will be better able to achieve our goals. Because whether your students rock the red and white and scream for the wolf pack on game day, or whether it's the maize and blue like they wear in Ann Arbor, or whether it's black and gold, they love us. They're enthusiastic about what we do. And if we can engage them in supporting our entrepreneurial programming, if we can engage their enthusiasm, their networks, and their resources, we can help better grow our entrepreneurial ecosystems around our universities. And so I want to talk about a program that I've seen really focused on developing alumni networks to help increase funding and network access for startup companies. And that's really around university-affiliated angel investor groups. So as I said earlier, angel investor is just a high net worth individual. And there's really two flavors of angel investor groups in existence. There's those that are independently run, that are completely separate from the university. Those include ones like Irish Angels, the Aggie Angel Network, Cav Angels associated with UVA. They're outside. It's a group of typically alums who've decided to get together and invest in startup companies that are associated with their alma mater. Great programs. Then there's the kind that are university owned and managed. One of the earlier ones was the Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs Network. And then the one I want to talk about is the Triangle Venture Alliance, or the TVA. So this started in 2015 when Duke University said, we need to do something to better support our startups. We're producing great technologies on the caliber with anywhere in the world, but we're in the Southeast. We're not in Boston. We're not in New York. We're not in California. A lot of our alums are there, though. And so they built the Duke Angel Network. And the way this works is members come together. They pay an annual fee of $1,000 a year to be a part of this network. In exchange, they get to network with like-minded alums. They get to come to campus for meetings, and they get access to a managed process for presenting exciting startup opportunities that are associated with their alma mater. It might be a tech transfer startup, or it might be a startup that was formed by an alum of the university. So kind of a big umbrella of what it means to be associated with the university. So Duke started in spring of 2015, fall of 2015. And within a few months, they realized they were onto a model that was working. They came to North Carolina State University, where I was at the time. They went to UNC Chapel Hill, and they said, we think we've got a model that'll work at any large research university. We want to do something big for our region. We want to do something big for our state. And to do that, we need all of you in. And so I still can't believe we talked the university into letting us do this. It just baffles me. But we convinced North Carolina State University to let us run an alumni investor network out of the university. I still can't believe it. We had to get people in development on board. Wait, you're going to go talk to our wealthy alums, our potential donors, about startup investing? But the truth is that a lot of our alums are not interested in having a building named after them. They don't get excited about endowing a chair. They are excited about entrepreneurship. They are already angel investors. And why not also invest in companies associated with their alma mater? That sounds like fun. That gives me something exciting to talk about at cocktail parties. Why not? And, we really started to see the results. Duke saw the results, people starting to give who weren't previously engaged with the university. That's happened at North Carolina State University as well. People who weren't even engaged with the university now giving philanthropically because they've been involved in this network. And so at NC State, this was stood up in the fall of 2016. And Carolinas came along shortly after that. And today, the 3 networks have 466 members. This is a nexus of wealthy individuals who want to invest in startup companies associated with these universities. They have put almost $24 million of their own money into startups affiliated with the university. And they've put this into 47 startup companies, most of which are located within the state. This was a fairly light lift program for the university to put together. At NC State, they've run it with 1.5 full-time individuals. I think Duke has a few more. I think Carolina's somewhere around 1.5. And the cost of running it is offset by the annual membership fees. So this is the kind of thing we need to be thinking about, to bring like-minded people together and to catalyze networks aimed at supporting startups associated with our university. We need to think bigger than just focusing on the tech transfer IP-based startups and think about how to connect our alumni with what we're doing. And so I was happy and proud to be a part of that. And I always tell University of Michigan, if they had hired me sooner, we could have had the Wolverine Investor Network, but that's already taken, so we'll have to come up with something else. So I did want to talk just a few minutes about what we're doing at the University of Michigan, because I think it can be informative. We are a huge research university. We have $1.5 billion in research activity, amazing innovations. We are in a small college town of 120,000 people. So how do we get these innovations out? How do we build and support and interface with our startup ecosystem? And I think the programs and the ways that we figure this out in Michigan will be relevant for great R1 universities around the country, many of which happen to not be located in California, Boston, or New York. One thing we're doing is really interfacing with the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We're letting entrepreneurs know that we want to work with them. We're offering equity-only software licensing terms, which has doubled the number of software startups we launched this past year as compared to the past 5-year average prior. We're inviting entrepreneurs to come back into the office after we execute a license for their startup and ring the bell. We know it's going to be a little while before they ring the NASDAQ bell like Rodolph has gotten to do with one of his startups, but we invite them in. The bell is really loud. Everyone on the floor comes out, and we have the entrepreneur tell us what their vision is, how they're going to take this technology and use it to hopefully change the world. And it helps connect all of us with the mission for why we come into work and for the way that we're working to support the commercialization of these potentially game-changing technologies. And we're celebrating this. We knew we were onto something when someone saw us on Twitter and said, well, I did a U of M startup. Can I come ring the bell? And the answer was, yes, you may. Another program that we've developed is a mentor in residence program. And this is done in collaboration with Michigan Economic Development Corporation because they see technology commercialization, university startups as important to the state's economic development. This is a very important partnership for us. It allows us to bring people in who have significant industry, entrepreneurial, and investment experience as university employees. Most of these people don't ever need to work again, but they come in and they work with us half-time, mentoring very early stage technology-based companies. So this has been incredibly impactful for us. Some of these also work with startup companies throughout the state. Because there's some places in Michigan that also don't have great entrepreneurial ecosystems. We lament that Ann Arbor is a small town, but it's still a better base for launching a startups than many other universities in Michigan. Michigan State has their own program, and it's very fabulous. They're very good people. Go Spartans. And just to kind of illustrate the opportunity and the challenge we face, in 2017, U of M startup companies raised just over $300 million from angel and venture capital investors. That's a great number. We're excited about it. It's fantastic. But when you dig in, you see the challenge. And this money came to 38 startup companies. Half of these startups had left our state. They raised most of the money. The half of the companies that had stayed in Michigan raised just under 40 million of that 300. So that's really the scale of the challenge. We find that we lose startups to places like Boston, the Bay Area, even to Austin, Texas. And that one really kills me. For that first angel investment, sometimes it's $500,000. For that, we're losing a startup. I know of one that left Ann Arbor. We had incubated them in our incubator for 2 years, and they could not raise their first round of funding. They had to move to Austin, Texas to raise it. Since then, they've raised $55 million, and they're likely to change the future of AI. We want to keep those startups in Michigan, and I know you want to keep your startups here in Columbia. And so to do that, we need to think about how to bridge these capital gaps for our startup companies, because you're not going to get someone to fly from the Bay Area to Columbia for an investment in an early stage startup. We're going to have to figure out how to do that ourselves. Because this stuff is hard. I mean, my God, it's the smallest computer in the world. That's great, but what do we do with it? How do we build a business around this? This stuff is hard. We're trying to commercialize miracles. And if you think it's not hard and not challenging, I'll point out that universities in the best entrepreneurial ecosystems on the planet have found it necessary to create their own programs to invest in their startups. The UC system in California, it has that huge venture capital bubble around it. They found it necessary to put their own money into their startup companies because they want to increase the economic impact of the UC system. MIT in Boston has found it necessary to create a venture fund to support startup companies associated with MIT in Boston, one of the most venture capital rich pockets in the world. They did this because they wanted their startups to have access to patient capital. They wanted to take big bets on game-changing technologies. And so I just want to close by saying that figuring out how to do this is important. It's important for Columbia, it's important for Ann Arbor, it's important for Detroit, it's important for our country because the society is investing in us. It's counting on us to build the future, to create miracles, and we need to find ways to help move those out into the marketplace, create companies here so that our graduates can stay here, so they don't all follow the siren song and move to California. So that's what I have to share, and I hope we have time for some questions.
Thank you so much, Kelly, Dr. Sexton, for that excellent presentation. We do have time for questions, so please, if you have any questions, just raise your hand, and we'll run the mic to you if you have a question so that we can keep it on the recording and the live stream. Oh.
My question, Kelly, is about accelerator types of programs and how they're working things. I'm seeing a real shift in how they talk. More and more are saying, we're not even taking any equity, and I don't get how they're making that work. And there's also ones like Mass Challenge just sent me something, and they don't require you to move to Boston. They want you to come there and do the program, or do a couple of key events. And it seems like that may help some of the geographical issues that you're talking about. What can you tell me that's kind of the direction that things are going with these accelerator programs?
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting question. And yeah, Mass Challenge is interesting. It almost seems in some ways philanthropic to allow companies from out of state to come in, receive the training without the expectation of staying. We run an incubator at the University of Michigan, and it's subsidized by the university. That's just how it has to be. If you're going to run an early stage incubator for university startup companies, it's going to need to be subsidized in some ways. We currently don't take equity in the companies that reside there. They pay just at market rates for access to the space. So that's one model, but it has to be subsidized. I think there's interesting things that are happening. Before I left North Carolina, I got to see the opening and be a part of the opening of BioLabs North Carolina. And so that was based on a model that was created at Lab Central in Cambridge, now has offices in San Diego, the Bay Area, and Raleigh, or Durham, North Carolina. I think there the model is they want to select for the best startup companies to come in. They aren't taking equity in them, but they're providing access to the investors in the BioLab enterprise. So there's a benefit for the startups and that visibility, and there's a benefit for BioLabs in that their backers are also potential investors who want to see these curated startup companies. I think incubators and accelerators are very, very important to bring together and cluster companies and to really create those networks that are so important.
Question here. Yeah, thank you.
Kelly, thank you for your wonderful presentation, and thank you for coming to Columbia. I think my biggest question is, I think if you said there you only do equity only for software, is that correct?
Yeah.
So outside of software, what are the key factors in getting those deals done between the university and the startup in a way that allows the startup to flourish, allows the university to be as risk tolerant as it can, and to allow both to succeed in those types of deals outside of the software? What are some of your key approaches that allow you to be friends and partners moving forward as you go from taking innovation out of the university, putting it into that startup, and allowing both to go forward together?
Sure, and I think it might be helpful as well to explain a little bit of our motivation in going to equity only for software startups. Tech transfer really, as you know, Sam, was kind of built around licensing therapeutics. And that's really what a lot of our licensing models and understanding of how licensing work was built for these very long 10-year relationships even to get to market, and then hopefully a 20-year relationship with a pharma company. Software moves much more rapidly. The code that we're providing as universities is often not quite ready to go to market. They're going to end up rewriting a lot of it. We typically don't have patents around it. So it's very different, and they needed to move much more quickly. And what we found was that they were saying, well, I'll just open source my code and go around the tech transfer office. And so really what we wanted to do is to encourage them to come out of the university with a license. We're taking the portfolio approach. We'd rather have a small amount or reasonable, fair amount of equity in a large number of software startups than royalties and a large amount of equity in one or two software startups. So it was really in response to that, but I do think we're the first university to really be out there and say we're doing it. And we're seeing investors in our software startup saying you would be crazy not to go through tech transfer and work with them and get a license and get provenance cleared up. In regards to all of our startup negotiations, that was one of the reasons I wanted to build a ceremony around the launch of a startup and to have the entrepreneurs come back in, ring the bell. The other idea was a confetti cannon, but that proved too messy, so we went back to the bell. But, to have a ceremony where we know they're coming back in, and we know that we're really starting a multi-year partnership where we're invested in their success. We work very hard to maintain connections with all of our startups so that we can provide curated lists of U of M startup companies to investors. We maintain a pipeline report and active relationships with over 200 investors around the country and around the world. So by working with our office and engaging with us, you get access to this conduit for interfacing with over 200 investment groups. So we want to make sure that our startups are aware of all of the benefits that we're going to bring, and that the person negotiating the license knows that once the license is negotiated, we're going to be seeing each other again. They're going to be ringing the bell. They're going to be telling the story. And so even just that kind of has the impact of reminding everyone why we're doing this. I wanted everyone in the office to come out and hear the entrepreneurs talk, because even the person who's managing the patent correspondence, managing the accounts payable, accounts receivable, we're all supporting this enterprise. We're all helping to connect research discoveries with the marketplace, and it's important for everyone to be able to connect their daily work with this bigger vision for why we all come in.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time perhaps for one more question. Okay.
Kelly, thank you for really a fabulous presentation. I applaud the way you went back to the founding legislation of the Morrill Act, Hatch Act, Smith-Lever Act, the land grant creation. And you've made a powerful contribution in looking at what is really a set of discordant communication systems going on right now. And with regard to the role of the private sector, the public money, and private capitalism, and it permeates what we do in the universities and teaching in business and economics. And so I'm particularly interested in how you communicate with your local community in Ann Arbor in this case, and with the state of Michigan. Are they really aware of, and can you communicate the notion that there needs to be collective or public sector investments in some of these enterprises in order that the private sector can indeed flourish and serve Michigan?
Yeah. I think that's, you've really kind of hit the nail on the head. It's about communicating our value. And, being in tech transfer, I'm always cautious when we're called out to help articulate the value of research to legislators, to funding agencies. We don't want them to become focused on short-term, near-term returns. That quick ROI, because any technology that we're working to spin out wasn't just funded with one grant. It's built on years of funding and infrastructure. So I think it's important for tech transfer to always, try to make it clear that yes, this one startup that we launched was great, but it was only possible through this infrastructure that we had as a university that took years to build, and the contributions of dozens of graduate students that that were trained in this laboratory over those years. Sometimes decades of research into one single company that's launched. So I think that's one piece. In Michigan, I think there is a good understanding of the role of the university in economic development. But at the same time, Michigan is no stranger to reduced public funding for the university. And I think that creates challenges about how do you provide affordable education when the state support per student continues to decline year over year. I think at Michigan, I'm proud that they've really prioritized accessibility to the university with the notion that everyone who's has the talent, is willing to work hard, deserves a world-class education. So really focusing on accessibility for students in the state of Michigan. But it's a challenge. In Michigan, it was a challenge as well in North Carolina.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Brady, for the question. A big thanks to Dr. Sexton.